Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And we're your reptile girlies. This one's for the wild type of girls. All right. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Wait, is that like from a movie or something?
I think it is.
Is it like it might be Finding Nemo. It reminds me of It reminds me of when they're in the aquarium. They're like, today's the day. Like,
that's a good one too.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yes. Oh yeah, when they're in the dentist.
Yeah. That's exactly what that reminded me of.
Oh man. Well, anyways, welcome guys. Happy to have you.
Yeah. So, quick little housekeeping notes.
Yeah, business talk.
Biz talk. We actually are officially offering subscriptions on Spotify and Patreon now.
Yeah.
So, super excited. And basically what that is going to consist of is pretty much just early access to episodes.
Yes.
So, if you guys are really craving the next episode,
You're itching.
You can get it a little bit early now.
Yep. So check it out, or you can just support us through that as well.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe you don't care to get episodes early, but you're like, hey, just throw a little bit towards the podcast. Super appreciate it, guys. So thank you in advance to anyone who decides to sign up for that.
Absolutely. No, we completely appreciate that. But today we have a little bit of a sad topic.
Mood change. I know.
Yeah.
But it's so important.
It's so important to talk about this.
So important. And no one talks about this.
No.
Like, at least not to this level that we're about to dive into.
We're going to get into it. So today's episode is basically going to be about dealing with the loss of and grieving your pets. And this is going to be a little bit of a tough one for me. If anybody follows me, has seen any of my content, you might know that I recently lost a monumental reptile in my home, in my family.
Yeah.
And so me having just been through that, I think it's almost a little bit therapeutic for me to talk through all of this.
Yeah.
But also just hopefully for you guys too, because everybody goes through this. This is something we have all experienced.
It's the reality.
Yeah.
Like it is the harsh reality of owning like just animals in general, but reptiles specifically. Snakes and Sulcatauruses excluded, they have not that long of a lifespan. And we tend to have multiple reptiles, so we go through this a lot of times. And also a lot of our personal friends and family don't get it.
No.
And that's something that is such a frustration, is we pour our heart and souls into these animals, and we turn to our friends and family in times of need, and like we're grieving the loss of our animals, and they're like, psh, get over it. Like,
well, I don't know. I mean, and I know your family is just as supportive as mine is and things like that. And they try their best. They genuinely try their best, and there's sympathy there and there's empathy there. But there's always just a little bit of an air of, it's not as big of a deal as a dog or cat or something like that.
Maybe I should put a little asterisk. Like I've lost a reptile before, and my family was super supportive. But I have, because of the nature of chameleons and the space that I'm in, I get tons of DMs of people who have lost.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of like teenagers and stuff like that. And they'll like be like, my parents don't care, or they'll like, my friends don't care, or they go to school and like no one gets it. So we are so fortunate that we do have support system. We do have each other. And like, this is the whole point of why we're making this episode. So if you're listening, then you can feel seen too. And like, if no one else in your life gets it, just know we get it.
Yeah. To
get it.
An astronomical level. I mean, I'll probably even get a little bit emotional in this episode. I'm going to try not to cry or anything, because that's
we should have gotten the tissues
not
ready.
who I am. I hate crying or showing any of that. But
we're human though, right? And I heard this about grief a long time ago, and it has resonated with me years since, that the emptiness and space that we feel from the loss is a direct reflection of the love that we had.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna make me tear up alone.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh,
get your tissues ready, folks. But it's like when I heard that, I was like, wow. So like, yes, this hole in this space hurts so bad, but it also reminds me just like how much love you had, either for the person, for the animal, like whatever it is that you're grieving.
How lucky are we to have felt that love for another being, like no matter how small. I mean, that's just, there's always going to be a space missing, but at least it was once filled with love, and it'll
make me cry now.
I know, get smaller and, hopefully over time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
But, just these animals are very, very specialized and very difficult. And so we've kind of organized a little bit of a way to talk about this.
We had to be like somewhat structured about this so we don't just totally lose it.
We'll just lose it emotionally if we don't have some structure to this episode.
Pet loss is one thing.
Yes.
Okay, we'll back up. Loss, just grief in general is one thing. Pet loss is its own thing, but then I think exotic pet loss or reptile pet loss is then its own subsection. And there's things that we deal with owning exotics, with owning reptiles and losing them that people don't necessarily experience to the same extent with, say, like cats or dogs. So the kind of categories we came up with were trauma or injury, right? Something unexpected that happens that results in the death of the
freak
animal.
Accidents,
totally.
like things like that.
Totally. Sickness, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. And then just old age.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that pretty much covers all of the potential scenarios as to what, would have caused your animal to pass away.
Well, and the kind of like fourth subcategory, I would think, and maybe we can start with that if, we can kind of go around all the different categories we just talked about. But there's that other subsection that's basically like, you don't know. And that's so true. Is like one of the hardest ones, honestly.
Especially with exotics.
Especially with exotics, because there are so many times that if you lose a pet and it's sudden and it's literally out of nowhere, they were showing no major signs, nothing. I mean, a lot of us know all the signs, are they closing their eyes? Are they lethargic? All those things. And sometimes they don't exhibit weight. Those signs, all of those. And then, and then all of a sudden you have an animal that's gone and you don't know why.
And it's like the Achilles heel of reptiles, right? With a cat or dog, they typically are like whining or whimpering or limping or showing like pain, something that tells us like, I'm not okay. And then we're like, gotta take you to the vet. You get it. Reptiles, though, are notorious. I feel like new keepers don't necessarily know this or understand this, that they won't show signs of sickness. No. And the reason for this is so then they can survive, right? So they're not easily picked off by predators who are like, hey, look at me. I'm like sick and dying and can't fight it off.
Prime candidate for lunch.
Exactly. So they will hide the illness for as long as possible. So if we're lucky to even see the signs, by the time we see the signs, it could have been
it's almost
weeks
too late.
Or months
it's
that
literally
they've been sick.
9 times out of 10, if you're seeing the signs in a reptile that, their health isn't great, it's often too late.
And it's heartbreaking because people are like, they just overnight, it looks like they just got sick and now they're literally on death's door and they're like, I don't know what happened. And then I'll like look at their enclosure and I'm like, oh, it's because this, and this has been incorrect for months. And this is now
it's dire.
Result. Yeah.
Now it's worst case scenario.
And to your point that you were just touching on, like you can't do not that you can't do anything, but the chances of bouncing back from
are usually
that
pretty
level,
slim. Yeah. Their tiny little bodies can't take much, and by the time they usually are showing the signs, it's
they are past the threshold of like, I'm no longer sick, I am now dying.
But to our defense, they hide it so well. They hide it so well.
And some don't even get to the point of showing it. It'll be like overnight, right? They looked fine, eating, moving, drinking, like physically looking okay as expected, and then boom.
Yeah. And that's part of the shock of it all too, I will say. Like, oftentimes, cats and dogs and things, they live their lifespan, they live a long time, and you're able to kind of see that out, through old age. But I feel like reptiles are a little bit notorious for kind of sporadically passing, regardless of your, if your care is, correct or not.
And that we don't know what's happening internally, right?
Have no idea.
Your husbandry, your care, you could have bought from a great breeder, high quality of life, like literally do everything right.
Yeah.
And it still happens. And you're left without answers. Yeah. And that is just how do you move on? How do you grieve? How do you not blame yourself?
Literally, that's like one of the hardest parts. And the unfortunate truth is sometimes the only way to get those answers is to do a necropsy with your vet.
Yep.
But that's a really expensive process.
Yeah. So I did that with Apollo, my chameleon who passed away.
I remember.
And it was like $300.
Yeah.
To do the necropsy. And they came back and they're like, we don't have answers. We recommend that you do additional tissue testing, which was another like couple $100 to do that testing on top of what they've already done. And it was then that they were able to help determine cause of death. And it ended up being a liver infection. And I was like, okay, like what caused this liver infection? They're like, we don't know.
See,
so
and
I have like
you-
half the answers.
You paid all that money. You went through all that like back and forth, which is emotional effort made on your end to go through that process. I mean, that is an emotionally trying process in and of itself. And then you still technically have no answers as to what caused it.
I know cause of death, but I don't know
The cause of the
why
cause.
Yes.
I mean, that's and that's the thing is like you can go through like if you really want those answers, if it's, you know, you're one reptile that passed away and you're gonna, you know, just lose your mind not knowing. It's the unfortunate truth is you can pay all that money, go through that emotional effort and still not know.
I will say I do feel better having some answers. Like, yes, it was a couple $100, but to me, that was worth it. And you also don't know what the results...
I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah, what the results would have been. Like, I would highly recommend if someone has the finances to be able to afford the necropsy to do it.
Yeah.
Because it does give you a little bit of closure, especially with those unexpected losses where it just comes out of left field and you know your care is on point.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm so glad you did that because I think that brought a little bit of peace of mind of at least just knowing what it was.
Yeah. One thing I know we didn't really discuss this beforehand, but I think is worth mentioning that is unique to reptiles. It's going to sound morbid, but hey, this is the topic of this video. Is just finding them dead. Like, I don't know how else to say this, but geckos don't have like closed eyelids.
No,
so their eyes are open.
It's so traumatic, I got to admit.
And
like
chameleons... like are tree dwellers, right? And people just find them on the bottom, stiff color. Like it is so traumatic
just
to
finding them.
Which you don't experience that with cat and dog. Now I will say if you're like cat or dog get hit by a car, like then you're in a very similar category where the image of how you know your animal is completely wiped away.
Gone. I can't even look at some of the pictures I have of Barney, my panther chameleon, on his last days. I mean, I'm glad I have them, but it's so hard to look at because he was honestly so far gone.
This is gonna sound weird, but here we are. I'm just gonna say it. Is I would look up pictures of dead chameleons to try and like desensitize myself as like messed up as that.
No, it's not.
As that sounds.
It's not.
Because the reptile, like I said, no one talks about this.
No, and it's so traumatic finding them because their bodies and the way that they pass away, it's just it's such a different situation than finding, you know, your cat or dog passed away or anything like that because, you know, they still look the same. Their body's not sunken in. Their eyes aren't, you know, half gone.
Like their colors are just
gone,
completely
gone.
Their eyes are open. You can't even close their they're just like
no. It's so traumatic.
It's so messed up, and like we then have to deal with seeing that, dealing with that,
forgetting that image.
And if you didn't even expect the loss to come, then you're surprised by that. Like that, I think is something that is a little bit unique to reptiles. I agree. Is the unfortunate reality of being a keeper that we have to deal with.
It's so tough. It's oh gosh, it's just heartbreaking in those situations. I mean, especially, and so getting into like the sickness aspect, you know, that category, watching a reptile decline is also so gut wrenching.
So, yeah, this is. I think the weight loss is a tough one to swallow because like a couple grams here and there, you're probably not gonna notice it. But by the time you see bones protruding, they've lost a significant amount of body mass, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on, right? Like you check on these guys every single day, and you're just used to it. The tiny progression of weight loss is going to be really hard to catch, right? So then it's like it's not until it's like bad, and you're like, why can I all of a sudden now see these bones that I couldn't see before, right?
Yeah, and that's like, one of the hardest parts. I mean, it's the weight loss is really, really hard to stomach. Yeah. You know, and obviously that comes with sickness, that comes with old age, that comes with all the different categories.
Decreased appetite, I feel like, is a common symptom of a sick reptile that like people don't usually talk about.
Or their appetite's the same, but they're just losing weight and it's noticeable.
Yes, that is also problematic.
It's huge.
Friendly reminder to get your fecal test done on a regular basis so you can stay on top of, because that's typically what it is with weight loss. And my experience is pretty exclusively in chameleons. But when we see chameleons all of a sudden dropping weight, it's typically a parasite.
Well, and just to be super clear too, you guys can, you know, your reptile can come from a healthy breeder. You're an ethical breeder, like all of these things. You can have done everything right and still get parasites through their food. So just a note, like, just because, you know, I see people all the time will, you know, say, there's no way my reptile has any parasites. I only have one reptile. They can get it through their insects, through their food.
It's still good to do on a
you should always do
semi-regular
that.
basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially if you're noticing things like weight loss.
Right, that's huge.
Yeah, or like, I don't know. I've done videos on like the signs of a sick chameleon. So like, if you're a keeper, you're like, how do I make sure my animal doesn't get sick? That would be my biggest piece of advice. One, get your enclosure reviewed by an expert, whether that's on a forum, a Facebook group, a fellow friend, a vet, like whatever it is. Get your ducks in a row. Make sure everything in your care is correct.
It's up to par, yeah.
And then learn the signs.
I was going to say, knowing the symptoms is critical.
So then you can be on the lookout for them.
Yeah, if you don't know what to look for, then you're doing yourself and your animal a disservice, because there's no way you're going to catch anything if you don't know what to look for.
And then thirdly, in order to catch it, you have to be checking in on your animals, right? Even if they're in their hide all day, you still need to do like a wellness check.
Yeah.
Like
I try to take every single one of my animals out, even the ones who hate it, at least once a month, just so that I can get a good look at them, you know, see how they're doing, make sure that I, you know, check for mites or anything like that.
Animals, I feel like, is a good.
I'm not as good about that as I need to be, and I need to be more up on that for sure.
I'll give a little plug. I just came out with this reptile keeper journal where it's a PDF and you can track like your food, supplements, and in there I have a weight tracker.
Yeah, it's
and
huge.
It helps hold you accountable to weigh your animals on a regular basis. It's really great if you have a baby, so you can see their like growth rate and stuff like that. But even as an adult, like reptiles are constantly growing. So if we can, but you'll have like their baseline weight. So if they're dropping from that and it's not noticeable enough that you can tell just by looking at them, then having that tracker is a good way to do it.
Super helpful. Keeping track of that stuff is critical.
Also available on my website, neptunethechameleon.com.
Yes. I still need to print mine out. I've had it for over a week now, and so I need to print mine out, but I'm going to start doing that as well.
But super handy to keep track of that stuff, and so then you can have kind of like wellness checks to make sure that they're not exhibiting
wellness
any
checks
signs.
are huge. You should always be doing those. I try to look over my pets, you know, every month or so. That's just a very important thing to look out for.
Absolutely. Okay, so with sickness, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we switch?
I don't think so. I think just no matter what, because I have been in the position where I was noticing a reptile was losing weight, and this, I'm specifically thinking about Ducky, my giant leaf-tailed gecko who passed away a year and a half ago. I noticed that he was losing weight. I tried to up his food before I took him into the vet. And that's something, you know, you should always do. If you notice they're losing weight, it could just be a diet thing. So, you know, you want to do that. But even if, you know, you up their weight, like take them into the vet. Like
maybe that's something we should talk about as vets, because we haven't had, and we do have plans to have future episodes talking about vets and stuff like that. But I think with reptiles, it's so important that we have exotic vets, because it's not an if, it's a when.
Absolutely.
Like that's the reality of it. And so having your vet lined up and having an emergency vet lined up, like what if it's the weekend? What if they're booked up on appointments? Do you have a plan B? Do you have a vet that will see you? Do you have a vet?
What's your backup plan?
That you can trust? Because if they're declining to that point, like that's no longer a husbandry and care issue.
Yeah,
there's something
else
internally
going on.
Yes.
Right.
So then you're going to need likely vet care in order to try to get them to, you know, recover and do well. But if you don't have a vet lined up, you do not want to be in the position of your animal declining and you're freaking out because you don't know what to do.
And you're just calling around trying to vet your vets and figure out who you
and
trust.
Not all exotic vets are created equal, right? Yeah. Not all are equipped to handle whatever your species or the situation or the severity.
Especially when you get more into like specialized species and things like that, like chameleons, they're so finicky, and not all vets know chameleons as well as you would like to.
Or are up to date, right? They might have old school information, but I mean, I love the hobby, but we're constantly pushing forward, which means sometimes it's unrealistic for one vet to be up to date on all the species.
And I mean, sympathy to all the vets. Like, there's a lot of animals out there. They can't be experts on all of them. That's for sure.
I do just chameleons, and that's plenty to try and keep up with.
You know, vets are an incredible resource, and they're an incredible, you know, just something that you have to have. They're not even. It's just a necessity to have.
If you can already have that relationship and have that confidence that you already have this a vet picked out that you can go to. If and when, hopefully not, but like when that time
when it
arises.
occurs, because it usually does at some point. We all experience it.
I know you wanted to talk about Draco and Drusilla.
Oh,
if we're
that's a
talking
good one. I
about
almost forgot.
sickness, if we're talking about vets, if we're talking about catching things early on, like, because we've already mentioned there are times where like they're just too far gone, or just they get sick out of nowhere. There was no early signs. But what if there are signs and you are able to take them?
If
right?
there are signs earlier on, and you know that, and you're able to kind of, jump on that train and, take them to the vet, do all the right things, hopefully they'll bounce back. Hopefully there's that room for improvement.
And there are success stories. Like, I don't want you guys to think that like, just because they're showing some symptoms that it's like game over. Like, please fight for your animals. Please have your finances in check where you can financially support whatever is necessary to, within reason to,
I had
for these animals.
I had a situation years and years ago where my Panther Chameleon Barney was showing signs of sickness, and I found out it was actually the apartment that I had been in and the lack of air quality. But at the time, I thought he was just sick and I didn't know what was going on. I took him to 3 different vets, and eventually he got better after I moved him out of that environment. But he bounced back, and he was literally, it seemed like he was on death's door. I mean, he was so lethargic, crazy, but he bounced back and he lived for another 5 years.
Right.
So, there's definitely success stories as long as you're catching the signs and picking up on them as early as possible. So it's definitely not a lost cause. But then there are situations like with my Draco and Drusilla. We've talked about them before, but they were my satanic leaf-tail geckos, and they're tiny. You guys, they are literally like 3-4 inch geckos.
Itty bitties.
Itty bitty, tiny little things. And I had started to notice on Drusilla, my female, I had noticed that she was her, what are they called? Calcium sacs. They have these calcium sacs kind of under their neck. And I had noticed that they were really big, and it was weird. And I was like, that doesn't look normal. So I reached out to a couple different, Fantasticus breeders. Super breeders.
Super
like
experienced.
very, very experienced in the species. And, and they had let me know they had a couple of geckos that had enlarged calcium sacs, but, nothing had really gotten wrong. And so I was like, okay, that doesn't look, maybe that's not that big of a deal. And so I didn't worry about it too much. But then as time progressed, the bulge started to get darker, and color change, guys, can be a really big sign of an infection or something going on underneath.
Not good.
So,
either way.
Never.
Either way.
No matter how you slice it, it's not good. And so at that point, when I noticed a color discoloration on the calcium sac, I took her into my vet, and I ended up paying for a $500 surgery to have that calcium sac drained. And we, tested the substance, and it definitely was a little bit of an infection, but there was no real reasoning for, what caused it or anything like that. And again, I had spoken to, breeders and things like that who, were very experienced in this pretty rare species.
And this vet was very experienced in exotics.
Yeah, she was wonderful. The surgery went off without a hitch. It was amazing. It looked great. It all started to heal and seemed fine.
Yep.
And then a couple months later, she was just gone. And I thought that it was healing. I thought that it was getting better. And seeing that and seeing her gone was awful. And I had put in so much, money, time, effort, the stress of, the surgery,
the emotional toll
of all of that. And so that was a really hard loss, because I had done everything I possibly could, which it's a double-edged sword. It's, bittersweet, because at least I had that satisfaction of knowing I tried literally everything. Yes. I did everything that I could.
You did right by her. You did everything in your power you could possibly do to do that. And again, and still sometimes isn't enough. I do want to call out too, I know I talked about for 2 seconds, the finances, right? Of this. I remember when we were talking about paying for that surgery, and it was $500. Yep. And you're like, that's a lot of money. You're like, but I'm in a place where I can do that.
I can do it. Is that how I want to spend $500? Of course not. But if this can save her, why not try?
Yes. So to be in a place financially where you can do that, and people have asked us, and we'll do this in future discussions of budgeting for reptiles. But I'm a firm believer that if you cannot afford the vet care, you cannot afford.
I couldn't agree more.
The animal, that is part of the cost of owning the animal. Yep. Reptiles included. in that
Agreed.
if you have the ability to do something ahead of time, like you're noticing the signs, you go to the vet. I've taken Neptune to the vet. Neptune was $275. To get blood work done, $400.
Yeah.
Right?
Insane.
Like you
Insane.
will pay astronomically more in vet bills than you will for the cost of the animal. Also for their enclosure. That's just
easily.
But like you go, when you make this commitment to owning this animal, you are also making that financial commitment, which includes vet care.
Couldn't agree more. And just to be clear on that, when we say like, if you can't afford the vet, you can't afford the pet, we're not talking about those situations where, you have a parasite or something running through your entire little reptilian family.
Yeah, we are human. We are understanding that there are life circumstances. This is not us being like, super hard, super intense. This is just when you are deciding whether or not to take on the commitment of this animal, you need to give equal consideration to the finances, and in that should be included potential veterinary costs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the main thing, is just it needs to be a consideration. If you can have, that money saved and put aside just in case, it's going to be beneficial and it's going to be a good situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in that situation with Draco and Drusilla, Draco ended up experiencing the exact same symptoms about 6 to 8 months later, and, lost him as well. And it's so hard when you start to see an animal decline and things like that, especially when there's no real reasoning. I had an incredibly experienced vet, and I opted not to do the necropsy just because the cause of death was pretty obvious with, it's some kind of an infection, but we don't know what or why. But it just, it's always hard watching an animal decline. But if, hopefully you've planned and considered for those vet costs, and, you're in a position where you can do that. If you're not, we get that too, but definitely something to remind yourself of when you're looking into getting a pet.
Absolutely. So that leaves us with two other categories, the like trauma, injury, freak accident category, and then kind of the old age. Yeah. And I feel like we should kind of call it something that distinguishes the two. One, you get to say goodbye.
Yes.
The other one, you don't get to say goodbye.
Honestly, I don't know what's worse.
Both suck.
Both are awful. I've dealt with both, and they're both horrific.
Are terrible.
Yeah.
And yes, we're talking about reptiles and animals, but like I've also dealt with human loss and human grief. I know you have as well. Like we have, relatives that die of old age, and you see them decline. Yeah. We see our animals decline over time, and that is horrific in and of itself. But then to have someone, an animal person otherwise, pass away unexpectedly and not have the chance to say
it's all trauma
goodbye, that's awful too.
So talking about, not humans, but from the reptile front, I, back in the day, had a Leachianus gecko, and you know the story. You were my first phone call as I experienced this. Yeah, it's love my husband to death. He's usually my first call, but you're also typically a first call.
But
because
when it comes to the scaly critters, the scaly kiddos, you need your reptile bestie that you can lean on.
You need that person. It's so important. It's been a lifesaver for me in these situations. But so with my Leachianus gecko, her favorite hide was this cork bark round, and it was her favorite hide, and she loved it, and she was always in there throughout the day. That's where she always was. And I had no idea, but apparently she had outgrown it. She was able to fit down in there, and she didn't look too big for it, which is why I hadn't swapped it out. Right. But apparently when she would turn around, she was getting too big for it. And so I didn't know
she could fit in going one direction.
But she couldn't turn around.
Yeah.
And so, or I think she could, but I think if she moved too quickly or something like that. So essentially what I believe happened based on how I found her was she was probably, hunting some of her bugs, things like that. She loved crickets and dubia roaches. So, and I would often, sprinkle some down in there at night for her because, again, she loved this hide. So I would sprinkle some down in there and she would go after them.
Yep.
And I think what happened was she was chasing a bug and whipped around and got stuck. And it was awful finding her like that.
That's what I was saying.
Because all I can expect is that she passed from the stress of trying to get unstuck And I just, oh my God, I can't even like think about how she felt. And it just, those situations are awful.
Freak accidents, right?
Like, it's just, ugh, I'm literally getting teary-eyed thinking about that. I haven't thought about that one in a while. That's been several years, but
that was a really hard one, like finding her like that. So she was in the log and had been deceased. I
actually had to bury her within the log.
We had talked about that, and you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I'm on my way. Yeah. I'm on my way. So I popped over, and like we were going back and forth of like, what is the best way?
Do we try to get her out? Do we not?
But like, I think I was the one who said this, like I think the best way to preserve her decency, but also her memory and everything,
her dignity,
was to just like let her be peaceful.
And my trauma of like seeing her, because
there was not going to be any easy way of like getting her out of there.
She was stuck. Yeah,
so it's like, okay, we will just keep her honor in place and just like her memory and everything, and remember her in her prime, jumping around, eating all her little buggies and stuff like that. And so we decided to
buried her in the cork bark. And and I'm very glad we did that, because I think it would have been extra traumatizing to have attempted to take her out.
But sometimes there's just freak accidents. Sometimes there's
a fall,
but sometimes it is just a freak accident.
Yeah. And that one took me a while to come to terms with and have some peace with, because I couldn't help but blame myself for not having switched out that round sooner, not having realized that she had outgrown it in that turning around capacity. Totally. And now I am a psycho about my cork bark rounds. I triple check those constantly, because I'm never going to make that mistake again.
Went home, and in my crested gecko, he has some like little tubes, and I just put paper towels down there. And I was like, we're not going.
If I even think it's even a little bit too small when I'm making my backgrounds and things like that, I just put as much of that.
Oh, I know. We did some backgrounds, and you're like,
we're never letting this happen again.
Filling all the little crevices and holes and stuff like that.
But I think it's important to because that freak accident was a freak accident, but there was something I could have done, which is like hard to accept. And I think that's something that, unfortunately, I think a lot of people can relate to, is like understanding that there are times where it is our fault.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of accept that and be able to move forward and learn that lesson, make sure that it never happens again. And that is a hard reality to face. And it is a hard thing to come to grips with and come to terms with, of I could have done something better, but...
And I honestly think we will all feel that to some...
Of course.
To some level, right? Like, even with Apollo, who was my king, who had passed away, like, he showed some symptoms of sickness, but declined within, like,
hours.
A day.
Yeah, it was so fast.
So fast. But then I'm like, oh, shit, like...
I think you had called me, like, the night before, and you were like, Apollo's not looking great. This is weird. I don't know what's going on. And then it was, like, the next day, you were, like, rushing him to the vet. I mean, it was so fast.
So I think we all feel a little sense of, like, feeling guilt. Like we could have done more. What breaks my heart are the stories where people have left enclosures open and cats or dogs have gotten to the reptiles.
Gosh, that's so awful. Yeah.
Like, that's another freak accident. Also preventable, right? But, like... That's just...
But accidents happen.
Yes.
It's almost similar to when, a dog or cat gets out and gets hit by a car. I mean, it's traumatic. It's awful. You rack yourself with guilt. And
you don't get to say goodbye, which is, I think...
one of the hardest parts.
Yeah, is really, really hard. In the instance of Apollo, yes, it was like lightning fast, whatever. I was like rushing him to the vet. I had him in his little like box. I'm like bawling my eyes out. I was like talking to my mom on my phone, and I just kept repeating, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. I've seen enough chameleons who have declined. Like, I know what it looks like. I knew exactly what I was walking into, but at least I had the chance to say goodbye, and I made the decision to euthanize him, which is something that I think is important to talk about.
I agree.
Is euthanizing animals is like a very, very, very tough topic.
It's a hard personal decision to make.
Like, I don't think a lot of people do it with reptiles, but to me, if we have the opportunity to somewhat ease their, like, Apollo probably had hours, realistically, like, he was not going to make it through the day.
But to give him that peace.
But
exactly.
Exactly. And it was like,
it's the last thing you can give him. it's kind of that last gift.
Like as his mom, as his protector, like, you know, but like, to me, that is how we can honor them. Right. Is through that. And it did allow me the chance to say goodbye. Yeah. Which was, I think, like, while it was unexpected and it happened very quickly, like there was at least still that.
Absolutely.
That moment.
On the topic of euthanasia, I think that kind of brings us right into like the old age aspects of it all. Because at least in my experience, that's usually the situation towards end of life care. Yes. Is usually you kind of have to come to the decision of
quality of life. Yeah. Right. I know. So I'll give you a second to regroup yourself. Yeah. So, when Barney was declining, we had a lot of conversations. And like, I mean, I've known Barney for years and love him to pieces. So I felt like I was a little bit like in lockstep with this. And it's like, how do you know when the time has come, especially when it comes to old age? And the point that we reached together was like, when your chameleon can no longer chameleon, when your gecko can no longer gecko, when your snake can no longer snake. And by that, we mean chameleons are tree climbers. If your chameleon can no longer hold on to branches, if your chameleon can no longer climb, eat on their own, like, what is their quality of life? Like, if they're no longer able to do the things that they're meant to do, and maybe you make some modifications, right? Maybe you like, you know,
absolutely
make their enclosure a little smaller, or things that are easier to climb, or, you know.
There's hospice care for reptiles as well. I did that with Barney. So
it's not to say like, well, you can't do this. No, you're gone. But like within reason though, right? And like, I feel like sometimes we get so emotionally attached to these animals.
It's so easy to.
That like we let them go to the point of suffering. And like that's on us. Right? We have to do right by our animals. And if we have the opportunity to put them out, I don't know if that sounds bad, but like
out of their misery.
Yeah. But like,
that's a harsh way to say it. But
like to honor them though, right? Of like, I have so much respect for your life and our relationship that I will do right by you. Yeah. Right. And like, that's how I look at it.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's very much like when your reptile is not able to do any of the basic things that they need to do in order to survive. Yeah. It's, you know, what does that quality of life even look like?
Yeah. GoldCoastRoaches.com is a small family business in Southern California whose goal is to provide the best food for the best pets. They have a great variety of feeder roaches available, including dubia roaches.
But for all of our listeners in Florida and Canada, where dubia roaches are illegal, they also have Madagascar hissers, red runners, lobster roaches, orange heads, discoids, and death head roaches, plus an assortment of worms. So if you're looking to add in more variety to your pet's diet, give them a try.
Orders ship Monday through Wednesday with a satisfaction guarantee. Use code THEWildType10 to receive 10% off your first purchase.
Hey guys, it's Lyssa. You know I'm all about bioactive reptile keeping, and that can be a challenging new adventure to start. I remember when I first started, and there are so many different components you need to focus on, and it can just feel really overwhelming. But luckily, I have some great resources to help you guys out. First are my idea lists, which are basically shopping lists on my Amazon storefront. I've put together all of these lists for most of the commonly kept reptile species like leopard geckos, ball pythons, New Caledonian geckos, northern blue-tongued skinks, and several others. Each list includes links to the majority of what that species would need for the perfect bioactive environment. My last resource is discount codes. I know reptile keeping can get really expensive, so if you're looking for some great discounts, always be sure to check my link tree, which is available in my social media bios at Lyssa's Lizards.
It can be hard when you're first getting into reptiles to know what to buy and find a kit that actually has everything you need. Luckily, I've partnered with Pangea Reptile to make a chameleon kit that includes all the supplies you need to properly raise a pet chameleon. I created 2 different kits. The first is the basic kit, which has all the essentials, including the proper enclosure, heat and UVB bulbs, supplements, a hand pump mister, and more. And the second is the advanced kit, which includes everything the basic kit comes with, plus a Miss King mister, plant LED light, and fogger. The kits are available on my website, neptunechameleon.com, and while you're there, you'll also find step-by-step tutorials, discount codes, and the answers to commonly asked questions. Thank you in advance to anyone who decides to purchase a kit, shop through my affiliate codes and links, and for tuning into the podcast.
My experience with Barney, I literally came home from my honeymoon and I called you.
I was pet sitting for you.
Right.
And
you saw him about 3 days before.
And I was like,
and let me be clear,
he's not
too,
looking 100%.
My situation, Barney had essentially been slowly declining for about a year.
Yes.
So chameleons typically live, the average lifespan is 5 to 7 years. And so he was literally going to be turning 7 in like a month. And so I knew that his tongue had stopped working as well as it used to. He required a little bit more of like assist feeding, like
and
hand
you had
feeding.
already talked to breeders of like, hey, what are the signs of old age, like an elder, like what do I need to look out for?
Multiple said that,
and those were the things that he was
the tongue
showing. He was just slowing down.
Yeah, and so he was just slowing down. He wasn't, looking horrible. It was
no. Yeah,
it was a very, very slow decline. I noticed that his appetite was slightly less, but not by much.
But he was still eating.
He was still eating
everything. Yeah,
soup, still basking, still moving around, all the things. But and then I had noticed a little bit of like weight loss, a little bit. I was like, okay, this is getting there. I think we had talked about it even before my wedding of like, I think I got maybe 6 more months, maybe a year at the most.
And you had gotten him a fecal test, right, to make
so
sure.
I knew that there was no parasites, no anything like that. I knew that wasn't the case because I knew that he was getting closer to old age, but I wanted to make sure that there weren't any extra situations.
Yeah, or stressors.
Or anything else that was, contributing to the symptoms or the decline that I was seeing. And so, I just kind of came to my consensus of like, okay, he's just slowing down. This is totally natural and normal.
And expected.
Start to prepare yourself. And then I came home from my honeymoon at like 1 a.m., I think, midnight, and he was at the bottom of his enclosure, and I don't know how long he had been there, and he had fallen. And so I immediately called you, freaking out, and that's when you told me, I saw that, I think that was a Sunday that I got home, and then you had seen him that like Thursday.
Yeah.
So, you were like, Lyssa, I got to be really honest with you. He wasn't looking great when I saw him on Thursday.
Right, but I wasn't going to text you on your honeymoon.
No, which I appreciate. I would have lost my mind and tried to get on a flight.
And
but
he wasn't bad, but like I see him all the time, so I know
that wasn't the norm. Yeah.
And he wasn't his his normal.
And from that point, he dropped weight so fast. I've never seen an animal drop weight so fast. It was astronomical weight loss
while still eating
and not having parasites.
Yeah.
So it was just.
So it tells you
decline.
There's something
else
internally that's going on. Things are not working how they're supposed to be working. You got advice from vets. You got advice from breeders. Like it was at the point of like, okay, he has lived his best life. Yeah. And so it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Like you got to say goodbye, but you had to watch the decline.
And that is something that I honestly don't know if I'll ever get like 100% past, because that is easily probably the hardest part of all of it that I experienced was essentially the hospice care of it all, and watching him not be him anymore was easily one of the hardest things I've ever personally had to go through.
And watching you as your friend, and like you guys had just come from your honeymoon, you had just adopted this amazing dog and everything, and just like the emotional toll of, and we were having conversations daily of like, what's the Barney update? How is he doing today? And you're like, oh, he got a couple bugs today, or oh, he fell. Like what? It was just like constantly worrying and stressing.
It was a good 3 weeks of every time I walked into my reptile room not knowing if he would be there. And that, honestly, just the stress of that was horrific. I hope, I hope I have to go through it again, because I always hope my pets live as long as they possibly can.
And that's the other half of the equation. Like, what an honor and a privilege to have an animal live their full, lifespan.
Honestly,
right?
I'm so grateful that I got to give him that hospice care.
And
most people don't get to experience that. Not everybody gets to experience that.
Specifically,
I'm lucky. Yeah.
Like we don't hear about it often of animals dying from old age, and like it's not necessarily old age, right? There's something that something's shutting down. But like to live to their
full
potential,
yeah,
like 5 to 7 years is the lifespan. Neptune is turning 6 this year, and I'm like, it's in the back of my mind where I'm like, and I know I'm like, here are the signs of an elderly a reptile,
Yeah.
and like what modifications do I possibly need
Right.
to prepare for? You know, maybe he goes into a smaller enclosure or like different branches or whatever to like make it easier for him.
And that's something that I got advice from a lot of amazing breeders, Bill Strand, Reddy's Rainforest. Like I reached out to them and they helped provide me with, you know, modifications that I could make to his enclosure, a hospice bin that I could move him into. And that was monumental so that I was able to just make him comfortable.
And you just transition into, it literally is hospice for your reptiles.
Yeah.
And like they're still eating, they're still moving. You're just helping make sure that they're not hurting themselves so they can live out their days, you know.
Yeah. And then for me, just the decision, I did decide to euthanize Barney in the last of his days. And it was essentially because he was in his hospice bin and he was not moving at all throughout a 24-hour period
anymore.
No.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of...
And he stopped eating.
Yeah. That was the kicker. He stopped eating and he stopped moving and he was still alive, but just barely hanging on.
But in like he was there, but he wasn't there.
It wasn't him
right?
anymore.
Like
it was a
the
shell of who he
soul
was.
of like who Barney like. And so you told me you're like, okay, this is going to be the day.
And I think that's the thing to like really like instill in you guys is like, you'll know when it's time.
Yeah. And that's why I told you, I was like, go with your gut.
Yeah.
Because it's a decision you have to be comfortable with.
My gut was screaming.
And you know him better than anyone else, right? And so like, you'll do right by him and you will put your own emotions and feelings aside for the well-being of your animal.
Yeah. Losing your soul chameleon is probably
soul dog,
soul chameleon, soul reptile.
Soul chameleons are where it's at.
Yeah.
So I think that is like we covered
all the things,
but also like maybe just briefly we can touch on ways people can honor their animals. So like when I unexpectedly lost Apollo, but while I was there. So because I did the necropsy, you're not really able to preserve the body. I could have chosen to do ashes. I personally opted out of ashes, but they did give me a little clay paw print, and I would highly recommend that.
I got one for Barney too, and while his tail was very scraggly there at the end, the poor thing with all of his weight loss, but I cannot express how grateful I am to have that with his little paw prints.
But like... And so what I did was I put it in a little shadow box and that's now in my reptile room. And I'm like, okay, if I move, I'm happy to like move this with me. I don't have to deal with like ashes or a place of rest or like anything like that. So,
and there's all different kinds of ways you can honor them.
Yes.
I also have a beautiful painting that was done of Barney by a former coworker. And that is, I will treasure that for the rest of my life. And, and I have a very, very, something that I'm very, very excited about that I'll, show you guys in the future once it's done. But there are so many different ways that you can honor them and memorialize them and things like that. So if you do have an animal that is, going through old age and that you're going through that is something that you can plan for. And that's something I planned for because I knew it was coming. But, I just think having some kind of memorabilia or memorial or something is
I
so
also have
special.
A print. I got this beautiful picture printed out of Apollo in his prime, right? Like in his best.
I mean, he's living his best life. He looked stunning in that photo.
He has a little roach in his mouth.
Yeah. So special.
So there's different ways. There's different like preservation techniques that people can do. Some people do the ashes option, or people do a
I've
burial.
seen a lot of that recently, actually. Like on social media, I've seen people doing that.
So if you have an experience loss, like maybe this can be a good time to think about it of how do you want to honor them, because let me tell you, after you've just lost your animal and the vet tech comes in with the paperwork and is like, so which option do you want for your chameleon?
You don't want to have to think about that in that moment.
And at that point, like, he was the first pet that I've lost that was my not like a family pet, my personal pet. And so I was like, how do I want to honor him.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was a decision I had to make for myself. So hopefully this encourages you guys. It's uncomfy, but
it feels morbid. It feels wrong.
we gotta do it.
It's
right. Like
you will be so grateful later on to have like thought of that.
Like maybe you do a
beforehand.
little photo shoot, you know, that you can get some good pictures from. Maybe you do little paw prints ahead of time.
That was something that you and I had even talked about, I think like 6 months ahead of losing Barney, is you had reminded me, you were like, hey, just a reminder, because we had kind of started talking about his decline and, you know, things like that. And so you were like, hey, just a reminder, like make sure you get lots of pictures while he still looks good.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was really special to have too.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say, like, being on social media, like I have literally thousands
same.
of videos and pictures of all my chameleons, and like I am
grateful for that.
Forever grateful. Yeah.
Whew, this stuff is hard.
Also, I realized we're both wearing black, which I feel like is like very somber.
That was literally not planned. Oh,
like
that's
crazy. I feel
crazy.
like we need like a black veil or something.
Oh, wow. Like the one from my bachelorette.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I feel like the black is just like sets the
tone.
Sets
I didn't
the
even
mood.
think about that.
I know.
That's crazy.
I know. Yeah.
Well, it's really hard to talk about this stuff. I hope that, you know, I hope that none of you can relate, but unfortunately, I think a lot of you will.
It is the reality.
Yeah.
It is the harsh reality of owning animals, owning exotics. Like, when I decided to get Venus, I had to like, and I had just, you know, within the last year, like lost a paw. And I was like, okay, if I get this new chameleon, I am also signing up for the lifespan of this animal and the loss of this animal. And I think sometimes when we experience this loss or grief, human, animal, otherwise, we sometimes get in protection mode.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I'm not going to get close to anyone else because I don't want to have to go through this. I'm not going to take on another animal because I don't want to have to deal with
it's
this
definitely
loss.
a part of my reason for not getting any new animals anytime soon is I'm still grieving. I can't fathom taking on another
And
loss.
the reality is like we will likely lose them before we go ourselves. So I just want to caution you, like, don't close yourself off to the happiness and joy and fulfillment that can come with having these animals. Obviously, take the time that you need, do some self-reflection for yourself of like, do you have the emotional space to, you know, go through that again? But don't let the loss cripple you and paralyze you from living your life and like taking on, you know, new adventures and new challenges and new relationships and new animals.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think all of that being said, we might be a little remiss not to mention and discuss an important topic.
Another loss in the hobby. Yeah.
So I know a lot of you know that, you know, Brian Barczyk is in hospice and, you know, is still with us currently, that as far as we know,
as we're filming this episode. Yeah.
But I just think it's really important to kind of mention that, you know, while we're talking about pet grief and things like that, it's, you know, it's also important to grieve the loss of people you look up to. Yeah. And he definitely is a big one for a lot of people in this hobby.
Yeah. Human loss, right, is in a whole different
realm of grief. Yeah.
And I think the loss of, you know, potentially a mentor or someone who had a big impact in the hobby that we love and hold near and dear to our hearts. We are a little bit unique that we don't have direct relationships with Brian. However, people we are close to do have those relationships. Yeah. So it's hard not, like, you know, once removed, twice removed, whatever, to feel the impact that one single person has on the hobby. And Brian has had an amazing life and career, and like people can make their own opinions and comments and stuff like that. But one thing I have so much admiration for that I think Brian's a good role model of is growth.
Absolutely.
And learning.
Couldn't agree more.
In like,
implementing change, things like that. It's I think that alone deserves respect as, you know, acknowledging things and moving forward and implementing change. And then also I think it's really important to emphasize the fact that, like, especially in the last few years, he has been made a monumental effort in bringing the community together in regards to something like Animal Con.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of his legacy that I think is really amazing, especially for creators like us, having gotten to meet him at the last one, and just, seeing his kindness and his love for the community and all of that is amazing. And now we have that to look forward to, to connect with other people.
Very excited for Animal Con. Yeah. And I think, giving credit where credit is due, right? Like, Brian was one of the first reptile YouTubers.
Absolutely.
And I know plenty of other reptile YouTubers who are like, I started a channel because of him.
Mm-hmm.
While I personally cannot say that, and I'm not one to like pretend, but to see the impact that one single person has and the amount of doors that opened
for other people,
like, how spectacular! Like, what a legacy! And people can, again, say what they want to say, but like, that man has shown so much kindness, so much mentorship, and has opened so many opportunities for future generations to come.
Absolutely.
Like, how special is that?
It's so special. I mean, he how many, there's, everybody's making their posts right now. Everybody's making their videos right now. You can physically, tangibly see the amount of lives that he's touched.
The ripple effect.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's honestly been pretty astonishing for me to see.
Yeah.
Like, on social media, it's like realizing how many people's lives he touched, how many people he brought into this community.
Yep.
I think it's just, it's really important to note, and it's important to grieve if he's somebody that you looked up to, if he was a mentor, if he was somebody that brought you into the hobby.
Yep.
It's important to grieve that loss. And
I would see comments on his videos of people who are like, I used to be afraid of snakes, and now I'm not.
That alone, that's like my whole goal in being a content creator.
They're not even a keeper. They're not even a YouTuber. They're just like, Joe Schmo.
Now I'm not afraid because of you. That alone is a huge accomplishment.
Yes.
I mean, I think, and that's just something that I think is just really important in this hobby. I think a lot of us are trying to achieve that goal of helping make reptiles less scary to people. Yeah. And I think he definitely did that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. So we just want to give our condolences to Brian's family and friends, and anyone who is feeling the loss of his impact on the community. But I think the life that he's built is a testament to the legacy that he will leave behind. And like, as a person, like, what more could you want, knowing that you've made a difference, not only in the lives of people, but in animals.
Right. And I hope his, loved ones and things like that can, take a lot of comfort in that too. I mean, I can't imagine how they're feeling right now, but it's seeing the impact that he made has to be, such a good feeling, and just knowing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you guys are feeling those emotions and that loss, like, I would just encourage you to feel the feelings.
Take some time, like, feel it, really go through it.
You don't have to just like shove those feelings in a corner. Like, whatever you feel like you need to do to honor someone that you've lost, and whatever feels good for you, whether that's making like a montage video or inspiring you to start making videos, or just, give your pets the best life possible. Like, if that's how you feel like you can honor someone, like, then do it.
Do what you got to do to move through your grief, and just know that we're all in it with you guys.
Give yourself time.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen overnight.
No, it does not. I'm still over here grieving my pet loss. So
yeah, man, this is just like
it's really heavy,
rough episode. We promise the next episode we will
super peppy, super happy and cheerful. We swear.
But this is just so important, and like, people just don't.
Nobody talks about it to this length, I feel like, and so I hope we can help you guys feel understood. Know that it's a safe space to talk about this stuff. We feel the same things you feel.
If anyone gets it, it's us.
Yeah,
like, trust. We understand. We understand. Should we end on like a high note, though?
Let's bring it on a lighter note.
Perhaps a sweet note.
Today, on our little segment that is hopefully a little bit happier than the rest of this episode.
I mean, the bar's
It's on the floor. Bar's on the floor. But we're going to rank some desserts.
Yeah. So this is another blind ranking,
Yes.
which again is when I come up with 5 things, you come up with 5 things. You don't know my 5, I don't know your 5, and you have to rank them 1 through 5 without knowing what comes next.
Today we're doing desserts. Last time we did appetizers. So
We're just working our way
sticking
through
with the food theme.
the courses.
We love some food. We're some foodies over here.
Also,
so.
we have to represent the people who like the sweets.
Yeah, I have much more of like, I'm a carb.
We did
tooth
appetizers
person.
for you. We're
Now I gotta
doing
do the
desserts.
sweets for you.
We're doing desserts for me. So, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first.
Of you reading your list?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me get out my options here.
I'm a little nervous.
Okay. The first one, I'm throwing it at you because I know you love this one. So just be prepared. But we're starting off strong with ice cream.
What is it, like a kind of ice cream?
Nope, just ice cream in general.
Number 1.
I literally was like, she's either going to do 1 or 2. So I guess this one pretty good. But I knew you'd rank it high. But
High. Yeah, there are other desserts I do enjoy, just from like the novelty aspect maybe more than ice cream. But the dessert I eat the most often might go to ice cream, any shape or form.
Absolutely. I knew it.
Yeah.
So
coming in hot.
all right. The next one, I'm actually not 100% sure if you like this one. So cheesecake.
Yeah, I do like cheesecake.
Okay. I thought you did. I feel like we've eaten cheesecake together. So I wasn't 100% sure, but.
Yeah. Number 3.
Okay, that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I do like cheesecake.
Okay, all right. The next one, this one's a little, it's not totally out there, but it's slightly more one of the novelty ones, but cake balls.
Oh, okay.
I love a good cake ball.
So I have mixed feelings towards cake balls.
Really?
Yeah, they're not my favorite. Like, I'd rather have a slice of cake than a cake ball.
I am so not that way. No way. I'd rather have a cake ball over a slice of cake any day.
Nah, I've made a lot of cake balls. So I also bake a lot.
Yes.
Like, it comes in very handy as someone who enjoys sweets, as I can just make whatever I want. And so I've made a lot of cake balls.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the chocolate shell sometimes is like too thick.
Sometimes it's too thick. It's better when it's a slightly thin one.
Yes, it needs to be a thin coat. You need to dip it and you need to knock it off. Yeah, so the excess comes off.
Have you ever had, this is not on my list, but have you ever had Oreo balls?
Yes.
Those honestly.
I'll take an Oreo ball over a cake ball.
I actually would too.
But I'll take a slice of cake over an Oreo.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I'm not a cake person at all. So
we'll see what's on your list, but I do enjoy some cake.
the next one, I'm interested to see where you're going to put it because you are well known for this one. But
Well known.
apple pie.
Oh, yeah. When she says well known, it's because I have an award-winning apple pie.
She does. I had it this Thanksgiving. So it's
If
pretty
you wanted
fabulous.
to know random fact about me, that is one of my go-tos. When you're in like, you're doing like an icebreaker,
Yeah.
you have to go around and someone's like, what's a random fact?
Yeah.
That's my go-to.
I have an award-winning apple pie.
Yeah.
It's pretty dang good.
Multi-award winning. So as much as I make apple pie, I'm not a big
I remember you telling me
eater
this.
of
That's
it.
why I put it on the list.
Yeah.
Because I knew it wasn't like one of your top favorites, but you make a dang good apple pie.
I do. And I only like my own apple
That's
pie.
true. Yeah.
But I'm going to put it at number 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. The last one is a total shot in the dark. I have literally
Wait,
no
I should have
idea.
2 more.
2 more. No, we did ice cream, cheesecake.
Oh, I didn't
cake
even
balls.
rank cake balls.
Oh, you didn't rank them. I just skipped.
Yeah.
Oops.
Because I was like, I have 1, 3, and
That's
5.
what I thought. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So where does cake
I'll
balls
put
fall?
cake balls 4.
Okay. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So we only have 2 left.
No, 1 left.
No, you did one was ice cream.
Yeah. But I only have 1 spot left.
I meant you have number 2 left.
You said number 2, and I was like, I have 1 more spot. Number 2 spot.
Number 2.
Okay. Yeah.
You're going to be really sad.
What is it?
I know you don't. I'm pretty positive you don't like this one. Tiramisu.
Oh, yeah. Because I don't like coffee.
Yeah. That's why I put that one at the end.
Yeah. Okay, so if I had to... Okay, so that's number 2. But if I had to re-rank them, I would still have ice cream number 1.
Yeah.
Then I'd have cheesecake number 2. Then cake balls and apple pie are like pretty even for me. But
3 and 4.
Yeah, and then tiramisu at the end.
Okay. I knew you wouldn't like the tiramisu just because you don't like coffee or espresso or anything.
No,
So
I'll eat the top.
yeah. No, and I like the top too. And I like coffee. Well, I specifically prefer espresso, but I don't like tiramisu.
Oh.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, because the lady fingers are like soaked in the
Espresso.
yeah.
And I like espresso. I just don't like tiramisu.
One of my girlfriends got married in like 2 years ago now, and she wanted like a tiramisu dessert.
Oh.
And because it's like her and her husband like their thing, whatever.
Yeah,
and
they
I was
love
like,
it.
can't tiramisu.
No.
Then I can't enjoy dessert.
Yeah.
I was like, please do whatever you want.
I'm really weird where I don't like cake. Like almost at all. Like 9 times out of 10, I don't like cake unless it's a strawberry cake. That's like my favorite cake. And so that's what I had at my wedding was strawberry cake and then chocolate covered strawberries and s'mores.
I had them.
Yes.
I had a slice of the
my strawberry cake was bomb. Cake. It was so good. I loved it.
And the little strawberries had like little like tuxedos on them and stuff.
Yeah.
Those were super cute.
They were so adorable. Yeah. Loved that.
Cute. All right. Well, now I'll go on to my list.
Turn.
I was a little more specific with mine. So we're talking, starting off hot, a warm chocolate chip cookie.
Okay. So just like I'm not a big fan of, I'm not a big sweets person in general. Like I love sweets, but regular cookies and regular cake are pretty low on my list.
But this is a warm chocolate chip cookie.
Okay, but that could vary so intensely. Like
what do you mean?
Even if it's warm, like that doesn't mean that it's soft. How thick is it?
You know what I mean? Crunchy cookie. Warm, soft, like you bend it and the chocolate's like oozing.
Okay, that's okay. I'm debating 3 and 4.
Pick one.
I think I'm gonna do 3. I feel safe with that.
Yeah, we're in the middle.
Because I like it. Like I like a warm chocolate chip cookie as long as it's super. Like I basically like my cookies to be almost cookie dough. Is my preference.
No, I get that. Yeah, soft cookies.
Super soft.
Yeah. Okay, number 3. And next up we have New York cheesecake.
Ooh.
See how I was like specific with mine?
Yeah, you were. I almost put strawberry cheesecake on yours, but I just went more generic.
I do like strawberries.
New York cheesecake is freaking good. Ugh. I'm debating 2 or 4. 2 or 4. Because there's so many desserts I like more than cheesecake. But I don't know what you have on your list.
That's the name of the game.
Let's go with 4.
Okay.
I'm going to risk it a little.
Okay.
I'm going to risk it a little.
You got 1, 2, and 5 left. Double fudge brownies.
Oh, I'll put that at 2. I love a good brownie.
Yeah.
Love a good
brownie.
brownie.
We made brownies like a couple weeks ago.
Love a good brownie.
You're all hyped about them.
But those are my special brownies. I make warm brownies and then I crunch up Andes mints and sprinkle them on top and then let them cool. And then it's a shell on the top of the brownie with Andes mints.
There were no Andes mints in the brownies you made.
You're right. Those were my ones where I put frosting on top.
Yeah, with Oreos.
Crushed up Oreos. So those were my Oreo brownies.
Now I need Andes brownies.
Well, I tried to get those, but my husband couldn't find Andes mints. I tried to make those.
We were just in Andes mint prime season.
I know. Those were the best. Those are, trust me, because then there's like a layer of melted Andes mints that harden.
Yeah,
and
it's yeah.
So those are my.
We're doing that ASAP.
Those are fabulous. Yes.
Okay. Next up, we have a soft serve vanilla ice cream cone.
Oh. See, ice cream's your favorite. It's not my favorite. I'm very particular with ice cream. Honestly, my favorite ice cream is the Trader Joe's cookie butter ice cream. That's one of my faves, but just regular, like...
It's a good old vanilla cone.
That's going to be number 5.
All right. So one of them had to be number 5.
I'm just not a big ice cream gal either. I like certain kinds, and I'm weird. I actually prefer sorbet over ice cream.
That's true.
Because like the dairy like makes me thirsty, and I don't want to have like water with like a side of, I don't know. I'm weird.
Okay. Okay. So what does that leave you with?
So great. I did it again.
1?
I did it again. Yes. I only have 1 left, and it's going to be awful, isn't it?
Creme brulee.
Oh, that's my favorite. Creme brulee is literally my favorite dessert of all time. And you know that.
I know. I changed my answer. It was originally carrot cake.
Thank you for giving me creme brulee
I knew
as
you
number 1.
I knew I wouldn't do dirty. It literally says carrot cake.
I think this is actually the first time I've gotten them in the order that I would put them. So it's creme brulee. It's warm chocolate brownies, then warm chocolate chip cookies,
cheesecake.
That's
ice cream
exactly what I would have personally chosen if I knew all of them. So I feel pretty good. But that's all thanks to your last minute switch up. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It literally says carrot cake down there.
I'm glad. I actually love carrot cake though. With it has to have like really good like cream cheese frosting.
That is the only savior of a carrot cake.
Absolutely.
Is a cream cheese frosting, which is why red velvet cake is my
love red velvet
favorite because you still get the cream cheese frosting and you don't have to deal with the raisins.
Besides strawberry cake, the only other cake that I will like willingly choose to eat is red velvet because I love red velvet.
I was a contender for the. I was between carrot cake and red velvet cake.
Yeah, red velvet is pretty high up on my list.
Yes, or red velvet and funfetti are like my top two.
I don't hate funfetti. It's mainly just vanilla cake and chocolate cake that I hate.
Those are basic. Yeah. I love a vanilla cake, but I'll take a vanilla-based cake over a chocolate cake. No. Any day of the week.
Actually, you know what my favorite cake is that I'm just now remembering? At Whole Foods, I forget what it's called, but it's the one that's like got almond flavoring and then it's got layers of like fruit in the.
Oh, you got me one for my birthday.
Yes, because it's my favorite. I love bringing it to
really
friends.
Good.
I love bringing it to friends' birthday dinners.
Yeah.
I forget. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's the Whole Foods cake.
It's a very simple.
It's beautiful.
Very simple cake. Yes. It's not anything fancy.
Chantilly cake.
Chantilly.
Whatever.
Coming from the baker, a chantilly cake.
Chantilly cake. Those are easily one of my favorite cakes.
Yes.
I love those.
Those are really good. They're very light.
Yes.
Flavor.
Refreshing almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no,
good.
you totally brought me one for my birthday.
I love bringing, that's one of my favorite gifts to bring to like a friend's birthday dinner.
Like, here's a yummy cake.
Yeah.
No, one more because you want.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that wraps up this ranking. We've got some desserts. Now I want dessert, so probably going to get something on the way home. There may or may not be a Dairy Queen nearby.
Always good.
Get that vanilla ice cream cone. But thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a little bit of a rough topic.
Hard to talk about.
Thank you for sticking with us. As always, you can follow the podcast at The Wild Type Podcast.
All the socials.
Subscribe, comment, leave a review.
Do all the things.
Yeah, all the things. Always appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And I'm Lyssa Lizards.
And we'll talk to you later.
What? I totally just did our intro. And I was like,
this is the outro. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.